And joining us to discuss this mosque shooting and the psychology behind the alleged shooter, joining us now, Dr. John Huber. He is a clinical forensic psychologist. Doctor, thanks for being with us today. So first, can you tell us how anybody can carry out such an act and plan it all out in detail in a manifesto?
Well, what tends to happen with individuals who are planning this type of terror is they're driven by typically one of two things, some sort of political ideation or religious ideation. And since it was an attack on a mosque, I can only assume at this point, we don't have all the information, but that it was a religiously driven attack. And the whole idea of that is that there's some moral injustice that they feel justified in doing this. So it doesn't feel like an outrage to them. It feels like a justifiable act. And the unfortunate side of that is that it is, human life that they're taking in that situation regardless. And it sends chills through everybody's nation. We all like to have safe places in our world, and a church has traditionally been that for us. And so it's a good terror spot, and it just sends chills and electricity through everybody around the world. So it's a pretty easy target, and it's a pretty effective target too.
And Doctor, talk to us a little bit about the social media angle of this, if you could. The man live streamed his slaughter. How does social media play into this tragedy?
Well, there's this idea that somehow you can become instantly famous and that increases your net worth. In fact, I've had cases where people have been involved in committing crime and posting it on their social media and getting so many hundreds of thousands of followers and literally walk in and say, well, they're not going to do anything to me because I'm famous now. Somehow they feel like there may be some insulating factor in that. And, of course, that's ludicrous, especially when you're taking somebody's life. But there's that belief set that, they get these supporters behind them, and somehow it even makes them more legitimate in their actions, not just the whole narcissistic issue of trying to be famous.
And what about those who viewed this event unfold on their feed? What could witnessing something like this do to the average person?
Well, humans are pretty resilient, and the kind of people that would sit and watch that, unless somebody's forcing them, like a little brother or something is being forced to watch by an older brother, most of us that would continue watching that are probably somebody like me who's a professional, and we get asked questions, and so we kind of have to have some insight into that. And unfortunately, that's a bad part of my job, but I do have to do that on occasion. And then there's those people who somehow are excited by that, and those are the ones that scare me, because it does in a lot of ways give them kind of social permission to move forward and act in their own way. So I am worried about that impact that social media will have on the rest of the world.
So it is then very important for these social media companies like Facebook to promptly remove things like this that are posted, right?
Absolutely. I think Facebook did about as good as you can do. I mean, it was up, but as soon as they knew it, they pulled it. But like you said earlier, once it's out there, people have already copied it, downloaded it, posted it everywhere else. And that's the problem with the digital age, so we have to be hyper vigilant. And I recommend parents, pay a little attention to what your kids are watching on social media, because they may be watching that too, and you don't want to create any kind of triggers for them to have any kind of emotional distress, or for that to trigger something in them that says, hey, I can be famous too.
Right, or some sort of permanent scarring. So how are we as a society then? How are we able, or are we able to prevent something like this? Because, many people say that the people committing crimes and acts like this are those with mental illness or emotional problems. So how do we as a society deal with those folks?
Well, when we're talking about terrorists, the strange thing about terrorists is that most of them are not mentally ill. If I were to bring those people in a week before they did this and did a psychological battery on every one of them in my office, they would probably seem very average and across the board, maybe a little slightly elevated intelligence level, because there was some planning and forethought into it that we saw, just based on what we've seen here. But what tends to happen is they're again driven by those political or religious ideations. And unless they brought up their politics or their religion during the evaluation, I wouldn't necessarily know to go after that and do extra prodding. And that is where the danger lies, those true fanatics who will do anything for their cause. And it's a scary thought because they are average people across the board, and it's very difficult to identify.
Wow, they just are our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, and they're just walking among us and no red flags. All right, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insight with us, Dr. John Huber.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.